EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365 here following mandatory minicamp. The one day has come and it has went, and we're here live with you for the next 2 hours on Birds 365. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Wednesday morning post-mandatory minicamp?
Doing well. Last chance to look at the Eagles this spring. Now we got to wait till July, probably 22nd, not official, but I do believe they'll be reporting a little bit early because of the first preseason game being a little bit earlier. So, yeah, we gotta wring out everything we can from this one practice.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And we will do that here on the show for today and the next couple of days and the next couple of weeks, really, Johnny Mac on Birds 365. What was it like down there yesterday, Johnny Mac? Good to be down at the NovaCare complex and see really everybody, John. A perfect attendance for the Philadelphia Eagles, which I think is a credit to the team, the way they handle their contracts. Obviously, nothing out of the ordinary for us. What did you see down there yesterday, John? Just your first reaction and your first takeaways on what it was like to be down there yesterday.
Yeah, good attendance. Typically, the Eagles do. I mean, good team. They've been a good team. Sustained success is the word, the term they're using, and they've really had that before winning the Super Bowl throughout the Nick Sirianni era. So, generally, when you have good teams, for the most part, you have happy players, and that's the case. And I think it's evident by now the Eagles do business the right way. So they very few. Occasionally, there's nothing you can do. Hassan Reddick, if you go back, and this year with Dallas Goedert, and you're able to work it out before mandatory minicamp. So there's always little things that you can't avoid because of the nature of the business. But when you compare it to what's going on around the NFL, you probably saw all the stories with Trey Hendrickson, TJ Watt, and guys not showing up for mandatory minicamp.
How about in the division, John? Terry McLaurin in Washington.
Yeah. So it happens everywhere, and the Eagles are better at that than most. I think it's fair to say.
Yep, no doubt about it. So everybody showed up yesterday. Not everybody was able to practice, which is fine, but everybody was in the building, which is a good thing. Zach Bond didn't practice. He had some soreness. A couple other guys didn't practice. But, John, just your first takeaways from on the field. We'll kind of run through the things as quickly as we can. We do have Mike Gill coming up, and we have Brandon Lee Goutman coming up. So two great guests for you. BLG was in the building as well yesterday, so we'll get his takeaways. A lot of Keely Ringo talk. Johnny Mac, bring me on the field, man. What did you see from the guys on the field in the practice that you were able to watch?
Yeah, Keely was impressive, and I think that's a strong sort of finish for him. So he'll probably come into training camp with that being his job to lose. I think that's fair to say, and I think the Eagles are probably more comfortable with Adoree Jackson than people realize, as should have the insurance policy. So, I know there's going to be a lot of Jair Alexander talk until he makes his decision. I don't think the Eagles are going to be involved in that type of situation. I think they're pretty confident. And if Keely Ringo's able to finish this thing and play and live up to his potential, then you have a cost-effective guy as those big money contracts start to come in on defense, at least for a couple of years. So I think that's very important, and he played very well. Jalen Hunt as well, I think, had a big day, comparatively speaking. It was funny. I always talk about you can't really gauge offensive lineman, defensive lineman. I'm not changing off that philosophy. Nick Sirianni said that before practice, so you don't have to listen to me. Listen to him. And he caught himself as well, and he said, well, we really evaluate these guys. But you can see what you can see is the athleticism. Now, again, the world changes when Jordan Mailata, in this case specifically, and Lane Johnson, I always talk about when the pads come on. Then it's difficult. It's much more difficult to deal with when you bring that physicality into it. But Jalen Hunt has everything from a traits perspective, athleticism perspective, football IQ perspective, IQ in general as an Ivy League guy. he's got everything but the technique and that kind of stuff. Didn't play at a high level in college football. Hasn't been taught well to this point. And you saw him take off late last season. So sometimes all these guys who have this tremendous sort of clay to work with, and the same thing happened ironically with Jordan Mailata on the other side. Sometimes you throw them into the deep end of the pool and they swim. And you're like, whoa, you expect them to sink, but they don't.
Right.
And maybe that's going on with Alex Hunt. So I think there's a lot of positivity with him as well. And I mentioned after practice,
I read somebody wrote, John, they got some Brandon Graham vibes out of Alex Hunt with the way he was energetic throughout practice.
Well, yeah, the energy is, I think, Nolan Smith's gig, but Nolan's not practicing, was not cleared from his torn triceps, but he's going to be the energy guy. But yeah, I mean, Alex, I don't like that comp because it's tough to match up with Brandon Graham from an energy perspective. And Alex is kind of, I don't know who said it, but Alex is kind of a shy.
It was Jimmy Kemsky wrote he was the energy guy during practice.
Yeah, he was the energy guy during practice. He's kind of shy. I just don't like the Brandon part of the comp because Brandon's the most outgoing guy in any room. And I think his sort of energy envelops the whole organization. But yeah, on the field, he had a big day. And, there was I think a lot of people noticed because there was some cursing back and forth, which Jordan is prone to do. So I think a lot of people noticed that. But yeah, I think Nolan Smith is the energy guy. He's the guy who's got to replace Brandon Graham, at least, more so. I don't think you can replace Brandon Graham, to be honest, but from that perspective.
How about Terrace Marshall, John? I read a little bit about Terrace Marshall going over to the offensive side of the ball. I read a little bit that he had a good day yesterday. Danny Gray out there who had a good day. Nick Muse had a good day. A couple of interesting guys on offense had a good day. And then obviously I read a lot about Devontae Smith, looked awesome as well, which we expected. Nothing out of the ordinary there. What'd you see on the offensive side with those skill position guys?
Yeah, Marshall had a big volume day. He's a good player. He's I think this group of backup receivers a lot better than typically, and I think it's about Dotson and Marshall and Danny Gray, who are better receivers. Now, sometimes you don't want better receivers. I've said sometimes you want blocking, and that's Johnny Wilson's job, and sometimes you want a kick returner, and that could be Aniyah Smith, especially with no Avery Williams still isn't practicing. So don't know what's going on with him. So maybe they need other roles and it shifts. But if you just want receiving and AJ and Devontae are unable to play for whatever circumstance, this is the best group they've had in a while. But again, more things come into it, special teams as well. And I don't think Terrace plays special teams at all because he was a star in college and he was a second-round pick. Danny plays a little bit, and obviously Jahan is not a special teams player, but he's a starter. So I think they're better. But again, I think when you're building a roster, sometimes other things come into it, and people automatically say, well, you need a backup receiver. He's going to receive. That's his job. Well, no, he's got to do a bunch of different things. And that's why it's a little bit more difficult when you build the roster.
All right, it's going to be interesting to see how that room shakes out. Obviously, AJ, Devontae, Jahan are all locks. And then after that, John, I think it's really opened up. You got Danny Gray, Terrace Marshall. Probably Johnny Wilson will be back because of what he did last year in the running game. Maybe they bring him back. Aniyah Smith is out there. So couple of guys fighting for a couple of spots there at that back end. It's wide open on that front. John, how about the safeties, man? Sidney Brown, Andrew McCuba split reps yesterday. How did they look on the field?
Yeah, I didn't see a lot. McCuba was more noticeable because he was moving around. He had a nice little play, sort of snipping out Grant Calcaterra on a little play action, then really held it to probably about a two-yard gain or something. So you could see his processing, his football IQ on that. He played dime, which was the first time I noticed that. And that, harkens back to his day as a slot corner at Clemson before he transferred to Texas. So that was the first time you saw some of the cross training start. Mac McWilliams as well played some in the slot. That was the first time, at least when we were there. So you're seeing some of that start. And he also got caught for holding at some point. So, some good, some bad, but you notice him when he's out there. And I think he's a better fit for this defense than Sidney Brown. Now, Sidney, he slipped on the first play. And then I didn't really see anything bad. But there were a couple blown coverages, and you sort of don't know. Like Devontae got singled up on Small Munden, which I guarantee you is not the plan. And it was it went about as you might expect. And one of the safeties had to be responsible for that, but you kind of don't know which.
Right.
And then the same thing happened with the backups. It was Lance Dixon, and who's a linebacker, for those who don't know, getting basically singled up on Anaya Smith, and that went as you might have expected for a big play as well. So, and that but that was more of the backup safety. So, but I didn't notice anything terrible from Sidney. Nothing great either. So, I would say just a steady day for Sidney.
That's good. How about the cornerbacks, Johnny? Matt Cooper DeJean was out there. Keely Ringo, we already obviously talked about, but any rotational things there? Anything worth noting in that second part of the secondary?
Keely got the first rep. He had a good day. He was kind of feeling himself, I think, and he played very well. And he got more first team reps, so I think he'll enter training camp getting more first team reps. Marshall got Cooper at one point, which, when Cooper gets beat, you tend to notice. And he got him pretty good on a drag route across the middle. So, maybe more excitement for Marshall than negativity for Cooper, but that was a nice little play. And Quinyon was like Quinyon last year. Not a lot thrown his way. I don't know if that's by design. And there weren't a ton of first team reps for AJ and Devontae. Devontae probably had a few more than AJ, but there weren't a ton. Like I said, it was a big volume day for Terrace Marshall, and he made a bunch of plays. And Jalen, should start with the quarterback. I don't know. I bet you if the football hit the ground 10 times in 3 practices, I'm overshooting. I'm going under.
Is that a credit, or is that just the practice and the way they play in practice?
Well, part of it's 7-on-7s is the majority of what you're doing. There were more team drills yesterday, but it is skewed towards the offense. But even when you have easily 90% completion percentages, that's good from the quarterback's perspective. Now a lot of it is underneath stuff, and they weren't pushing the football down the field a ton. So there's a lot of context to it, but he just looked very comfortable the entire spring, which is rare. You go back, and I was talking about this with a bunch of guys, and sometimes he's not the best practice player. And we've said that from the standpoint, one of the things you can't see is in practice, because they always blow the whistle, blow plays dead. You can't see his ability to extend plays in practice,
right,
and make something out of nothing. So, and he would often earlier in his career get frustrated by that and say, why are you blowing the whistle? And the rep is dead. So he hasn't always been the best practice player, and he looked like a good practice player this spring, which I think is a big positive. And then, that carried over to Tanner McKee for the most part. I think he took a little step back. I think the backup defensive backs were a little bit better yesterday. Eli Ricks had a pass breakup. There were about 3-4 pass breakups. AJ Woods had one. But it was mainly Tanner McKee. And then also I should mention Kyle McCord, because that dude looked great. Now it's third team reps, but man, he processes quickly, which is rare for young
Yeah, it's great.
quarterbacks.
It's great to hear, man. A lot of hype on Kyle McCord. And all the Tanner McKee truthers, John, might have to go up into their shell if another year goes by.
Well, overall, he's had a very good spring as well. I mean, all the quarterbacks have, with the exception of Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and even he was better yesterday. So Tanner had a very strong spring as well. So I'm not disparaging him, and he's doing it against a higher level of player than Kyle McCord. But I can't believe that kid was a 6th-round pick, because when and part of it is my own personal bias. When I'm evaluating quarterbacks, if I get a young guy who can process, I can work with that guy. It's so rare, and tremendously accurate as well. So those are two of the top things you look for in a quarterback. Now, he doesn't have a ton of movement skills. He's not going to do a ton of off schedule stuff. But I think he's going to be a long-term backup in this league. And it wouldn't surprise me if he developed into a starter down the road. Now, you have to play a certain way. You have to play a more traditional NFL offense. You can't, you don't have the crutch of off schedule stuff that Jalen Hurts gives you. But when you can process like that, there are veterans who've been in this league 5 years that can't process like him.
And he stands in the pocket and delivers the ball too, man. It's one thing to process it. He'll pull the trigger and stand in there.
Yeah, he's very accurate too.
Yeah, very accurate, and he gets the ball downfield. So good, exciting stuff there for Kyle McCord. John, any other on-field takeaways? I know there was some movement on the offensive line. We don't see much from them because of the nature of the practice, but Brett Toth in there again at center, and I don't think that's a natural fit for.
They had a couple bad snaps. Brett had a couple bad snaps. That's followed him. It's interesting because he played left tackle at Army, and he can play all 5 positions. For some reason, he seems to get his opportunities at center. Now, Cam Jurgens is out. For those who don't know, still rehabbing from the back surgery, and they default to the veteran guy over Drew Kendall. I think if Cam's not ready by the start of training camp, and he seems good, he's out there and he's he was sweating up a storm, so he was doing a lot on his own yesterday. It was a very humid day, so he's getting close. I think he's going to be fine by the start of training camp. But if he isn't, you almost got to give Drew Kendall the reps, just because you don't want to waste reps with bad snaps. They went through this when Marcus Mariota was here, and the poor guy was playing shortstop because they couldn't snap the ball. And the reps were kind of ruined, and they had to bring in Josh Andrews just to be a sort of practice center. Now they got Drew Kendall, so they'll probably just shift to him. But yeah, a couple bad snaps.
John, any other on the field takeaways before we get the Mike deal? And then I also want to get your takeaways just from any of the players and the coaches that spoke, if anything stood out there. Not much, obviously. I mean, they don't say too much, but anything else on the field, John, that we missed to hit in the opening recap here?
No, I think we hit most of it. As far as the players, I mean, Saquon kind of tempered the retirement talk so everybody could stop worrying about that. And I mentioned it yesterday when we did the show after practice that I thought it was interesting that Lane Johnson was asked about the edge defenders, and he brought up Josh Uche first. I thought that was interesting. So, while all this big name talk, and Mike and I talk about this all the time, and we can bring him on, now you're hearing because Trey Hendrickson doesn't show up and TJ Watt doesn't show up, and now Jair Alexander. So everybody's like, oh yeah, now they're not getting those guys.
No doubt. Good stuff. Let's go to Mike Gill now. He's gonna join us here. Mike Gill Show at Mike Gill Show. You can follow him on all platforms and go over and subscribe to his YouTube channel as well at Mike Gill Show. He's the host of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN down the shore and doing 97.5 The Fanatic on the weekends. Mike, how you doing on this Wednesday, brother? Good to see you.
What's up, everybody? Yes, I guess yesterday was the final day of football for at least a month or so.
Yeah, if you can call it football, close to football, resembling football. But yeah, and some interesting takeaways. But we'll start with the hashtag no movement. Where's your listenership on Jair Alexander and TJ Watt and Trey Hendrickson? Everybody want everybody?
Jair Alexander definitely was up on Monday, which that one wouldn't be as strong as a hashtag no if you could get like a 1-year prove it deal type of deal. Like, listen, hey, you've been hurt the last 2 years. You haven't been able to be on the field. You want to come to a winner? We have a spot that we're interested in you, but I don't know that he would do that deal. I think somebody probably would probably pay him, give him extra years to come to that spot. Although, could the Eagles say, we'll give you 1 year, I don't know, $12 million? Would that be something they would be interested in? The other two guys, I think, are just too much. You'd have to give up too much to get Watt, Hendrickson, which you'd have to give up to get them and then pay them. I think you're out of the realm for those two guys, but I would think Alexander, you can at least make an offer and see if he's interested. I don't think he's as far-fetched.
Well, he's not as far-fetched from that as you explained it. You don't have to give up anything for him. So that, and obviously there's a big difference. You know, TJ wants $40 million. Trey wants close to $40 million. Right. So there's also, the money aspect, just the sheer enormity of the money. But you mentioned that number, so we'll use that number, 1 year, $12 million. Like, if you wanted to pay a corner $12 million for 1 year, why not bring Darius Slay back?
Well, I mean, Alexander is a couple of years younger, than Slay is. So yeah, you could say, why not